Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Edmondston-Alston House. We hope that you enjoyed yesterday's Hands-on History Thursday and that you have your Charlotte Russe ready to go there on the table, sliced with a glass of Madeira or a little cordial of port waiting for you, because that's what we're going to do out here on the piazza in just a minute, is enjoy some Madeira and some refreshments. But first, as promised, we have a little bit of information for you about the second floor of the Edmondston-Alston House, the public spaces. So we are back with Caitlin and with Virginia here at EA House for this edition of History Unplugged, our Friday afternoon plugged into history programming. Thanks very much for being here. We look forward to talking with you today. So take it away, Caitlin.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. On Monday, we left off downstairs on the first floor. We've come up the stairs to the second floor now. And if you were a guest in this house invited for an evening of entertainment, this is where you would be. You would come in the front door, up the stairs, and this would have been the floor for entertaining. You've got taller ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, a nice sea breeze coming in off the water. And if you'd like to have a brief peek in the library, we're not going to linger there, but that would have been a withdrawing room.
Hello, everybody. Hi, folks from Ohio, right here in Charleston. Rod, nice to see you from the UK. Thanks for joining us this evening. Here is that staircase that Caitlin referenced, that you would come up to enjoy some entertainment at the Edmondston-Alston House. Hello to Canada. Wow. All right, we're international, ladies.
Excellent.
England and Canada. That's great. All right, so we are looking at...
This is the East Drawing Room overlooking Charleston Harbor. We'll get a better view of that from outside. But this is where a dinner would have been held. Virginia told you on Monday about the dining room table that would have been carried up here.
And so when we're talking about that, Virginia, there's Virginia.
Hi.
Want to tell us a little bit about that in these two rooms here?
Sure. So the dining room table would have to be carried up here in the event of a large dinner party. The downstairs dining room, again, was just for families, so with guests, the enslaved workers would bring it up here, spread it out really across this whole area. It expanded to seat 22 people, so a massive table taking up the majority of this room, really, set for the occasion. And this room, when it wasn't a dinner party, could be set up for any other type of occasion as well, but these large balls that we hear about in the family records and letters and journals and recollections and stuff really all refer to this room specifically. And we have a first-hand account of one of those parties that would be just kind of interesting to share with you all.
Yes, we know about a dinner that Charles Alston hosted. One of the attendees wrote about it in his diary, and he did that to take notes on his own dinner that he intended to host to
oh, nice.
Chronicle.
Cool, okay.
Exactly.
If you want to be like the cool kids, the Alstons, here's what you got to do. This is the party you're throwing. Okay.
So we knew about that dinner, and I'm just going to read it to you briefly. Turtle soup at the ends of the table was joined by an abundant and symmetrical arrangement of other meats, boiled mutton, boiled ham, turtle steak, and fins, and oysters.
Oh my gosh.
A large plate of macaroni stood at the center, and vegetables were placed in the four corners. After offering the guests soup, it was removed, and a haunch of venison and a roast turkey were put in its place. The host often performed carving. And that would have been one course. So
wow.
Right, and so then the top tablecloth would have been removed by slaves. They would have taken away the dishes, they would have reset the table, and then it would have been time for course two, which was usually meat and vegetables as well. But for Alston's dinner, he jumped to dessert. So he actually had 2 dessert courses.
It's a man after my own heart. I'm here
Right.
for that.
So after the first course of dessert, again, that tablecloth was lifted. Now you're down to the bare mahogany. And you've got, your fruit and your nuts and whatnot. And all through this type of dinner, they would have been enjoying Madeira.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get to that. We're gonna have it out on the piazza tonight because it's a nice night.
Yeah. It's beautiful out there. It's a little breezy, but we're going to try and keep it together. So anything else you ladies want to mention about the second floor here?
Well, historically, these piazzas were also used as an extension of the entertaining space because it had that nice breeze coming in off of the harbor. And in the heat of Charleston, if you live here, hot and humid for really most of the year, you needed that breeze to stay cool, especially for these formal events where they're all gussied up with layers and layers of formal clothing. Being on the second floor was a better advantage to that, and being outside, you had even more of an advantage. So
we would see entertaining on the piazza. All right, so as we head out there is one question. And folks, if you have questions for any of us, and especially as we get into the Madeira, which is where we're headed next, please do feel free to drop them here in the comments. That's what we're here for. I'm going to get out from behind the camera and be in front of it, and we've got wonderful Andrew as a camera operator to read the comments for us. So if you have questions, let us know. So as we head out, are the 2 rooms here the same size, these 2 parlors? Do we know?
Approximately. The east drawing room is slightly larger, but yes, they are, for all intents and purposes, approximately the same size.
There you go. So the waterside drawing room is just a little bit bigger, just a smidgy. All right, so we're going to walk through the doors here on the entresol and come out onto the piazza, extension of the entertainment space. I was asked to highlight a magnolia, so obviously, yes. There is a beautiful magnolia blossom. There she is. Magnolia grandiflora, southern magnolia. Alright. So I'm going to back up here and see if I can get this set without too much wobbling, because we're not trying to make y'all seasick right before we taste a bit of Madeira. Alright, I think I've got it. Oh, thank you. Alright, so make sure that you drop your comments, questions in the comment section there while we socially distance. Now we have a little spread of snacks because Madeira is traditionally enjoyed with a lot of different wonderful foods, but we prepared ours ahead of time so that we're not, touching things and getting too close. But traditionally cheese, chocolate, sweets, dried fruit, nuts, and as Caitlin said, Madeira was actually a drinking wine, so it was used all throughout a meal. Now today, these fortified wines that we drink are often, if you can stomach them, understood to be either aperitifs before dinner, or they're used as digestifs, dessert wine, after dinner or with dessert. But that's not historically their purpose. So, ladies, I'm going to start us out with the one on our left, your right. And this is a Sandeman's Fine Rich Madeira. So it's a red Madeira, it's ruby in color. It's one of the sweeter ones. Historically, there are 4 different noble grape varieties, and they are Osertial, the Verdejo, the Malvasia or Malmsey, and the Bull or Buell. And oh, I did 4. All right, here you go, camera guy. Thank you. You might want to pour that into your fancy glass there. All right. Thank you. Sure. All right. So as we talk about these, and this one's actually pretty amber in color as well. So can we see that? So this one, trying to think of all the ways that I want to talk about this, ladies, because there's really a lot of different ways. So modern Madeira is made with two different kinds of grapes, really. They're Tinta Negra, which are a red grape, and the Complexa, which is a white grape. The four noble varieties are all white grapes. So even though they produce any range of colors of wine, they're actually all white-skinned grapes. So these modern workhorses that companies like Sandeman's use today are a combination of Tinta Negra, which grows really beautifully on the island of Madeira, and Complexa. And that reminds me, I should back up a minute. Madeira, right? Where does Madeira come from? So Madeira comes from the Madeira Islands. They're off the coast of Portugal. And port, like this one here, comes from Portugal. So if the bottle says Madeira or port, the grapes are grown in that location. These grapes are, Madeira is a volcanic island, so these grapes are grown in some really volcanic soil. It's incredibly nutrient rich. And so this one should be a little bit on the sweeter side, I think. It is. And how sweet or dry a Madeira is really depends a little bit on the grape that is used, but a lot on the process of the winemaking. So I have so many things to say about this, and I even wrote it down because I didn't want to get off track, but I want to make sure that it's understandable. So the development of Madeira as a wine, as a drinking wine, really happened over about a 100-year period, from early 1700s to early 1800s. And originally it wasn't a fortified wine. Did you know that?
We did not. I did.
Originally Madeira was not fortified with brandy. So a number of things happened in the development of this drink. And so by the second quarter of the 18th century, vintners are realizing that the American customer, who was a major driving force in this market, didn't like the strength and acidity of the wine just as it was. Basically, they were making bad wine. They thought it sucked. So they tried to figure out a way to reduce the acidity of the wine and to make it more stable. So when the wine came across the Atlantic on ships, you know, like any wine that came across the Atlantic on ships, there was a chance it was going to spoil. Yeah. Nobody likes skunked wine. Nobody likes skunked beer. Nobody likes skunked wine. So they were trying to figure out a way to make it more stable, and they found that fortifying it with brandy, with a liquor, made it more stable. So this was a deliberate act, and they also realized that one of the things that helped stabilize and reduce the strong acidity in the wine was the agitation of ships going across the ocean. So the wine barrels are rolling, they're jostling, and somehow that makes the wine a little more mellow. It has to do with oxygen coming in, and then the wine moving around and being agitated, and so that really mellowed out the flavor. So between fortifying and agitation, we're starting to see a trend really develop. And so Madeira wine becomes the American wine of the 18th century. Do you know some famous figures who loved Madeira? Some of our founding fathers?
I believe Thomas Jefferson.
Jefferson. He was a huge fan.
Probably George Washington too.
Absolutely. Washington? Yeah. Anyone else?
Even our local signers like Thomas Hayward Jr., Arthur Middleton.
That's right.
Sarah
Arthur
Middleton,
Thomas.
a Middleton fan.
And so was Ben Franklin, actually.
Oh.
Ben Franklin and James Madison. But Thomas Jefferson is known as a Francophile. He is known as a vintner in his own right? He toyed with growing grapes in Virginia. And before he ever cared about Bordeaux or Champagne, he cared about Madeira. So it took him a little while to learn to love French wine, but he loved Madeira from the start. So the four noble varieties, the Malmsey and the Buell are the sweetest, and then the Cercial and the Verdejo are the driest.
And
So
what are we having here with the fine?
this one is a modern, so this is probably a Tinta Negra. That was another thing that the American consumer determined for the Madeira market. They were originally drinking a blend, very much like this one. It was a blend of a black grape and a white grape. And then when the noble varietals were developed and being grown in the Madeira Islands, the the American consumer decided that they liked the unblended varietals better. So what did they do? They demanded the unblended. The noble varietals rose to prominence, and it's only been recently that these blends, because the Tinta and the Complexa grow so well, and these other noble varieties are a little more touchy, that we see this come back. So the next one we're going to taste is a rainwater Madeira, and my goodness.
Hold on to these.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we can put them in the box here.
We got a big gust.
We had a very big gust. So we'll just put these over here. Do y'all mind using those same
Nope, this is great.
glasses? Alright, so we're gonna go with the rainwater next.
That nice sea breeze that we were talking about that cools off the spaces when entertaining. This is what we're
Not
talking
what
about.
we had in mind.
It's definitely cool out here though.
But this warms you up.
It should. That's what we had. Is that my...
Cool.
There you go.
That's a
That's
lot.
some rainwater. I don't know. You don't have to finish it. We've got more glasses.
It was the wind.
It was the wind. So that's the thing, folks. These cordial glasses, they are properly sized because, again, we're drinking this all through dinner. It is a fortified beverage, which means it has twice or sometimes 3 times the alcoholic content of a regular wine. There you go. Alright, so I did a little extra research for you guys. So let's talk about rainwater Madeira. Who knows where rainwater Madeira comes from? The name of rainwater Madeira. Oh.
You know?
That's okay, you don't have to
it has
know.
to, you know, it has to do with like rain and water.
In theory, it does. It's actually kind of a trick question because we don't know where rainwater Madeira's name comes from.
Trick question.
Yeah, trick question, sorry.
I thought it was blatantly obvious.
No. So there's like 3 different theories, and the most romantic one is my favorite one to tell, but that makes me a bad historian, so I'll go through all 3. My favorite one is that casks of Madeira used to be loaded not only in the holds of ships, but also on the decks, and that as they made the transatlantic crossing, sometimes the rain would fall and it would soak into the staves of the barrels, and it would have an effect on the color and the flavor of the wine. That's probably the least likely of all of them. So what's probably true is, here's another romantic tale for you, another one that's probably not true, that a cask of Madeira was left out in Savannah, and a gentleman who hadn't yet purchased it wanted to taste the Madeira, and after the rain had rained into the cask and watered down the Madeira, he tasted it and declared it to be as smooth and silky as rainwater.
Okay.
Right. What's probably true is that the grape varietal that makes rainwater Madeira, which today is still a Tinta Negra, is actually grown in a different part of the island. So the northern upland part of the Madeira Island is very mountainous, it's really volcanic, and it has a much higher rainfall percentage per year than the southern coastal cities where Madeira is shipped out of. So if Madeira is being produced there, then the rainwater is mostly what's feeding those grapes. Rainwater Madeira. So that's probably it. So let me show you guys. This one is much lighter, much clearer in color.
It's not quite as sweet as the first one too.
Not quite as sweet.
Yeah, a little
Just lighter.
tartness at the
It's,
end. Yeah.
it's lighter in color and kind of in the palate too.
There you go. So again, fine rich. These are meant to be sort of rich, robust flavors, strong flavors. The lighter we get and the drier we get in the grape, then the lighter we'll get in color. Although the Social, I think, is going to be a little bit darker again, but it'll be drier. So a couple of other things that happened during the 18th century in terms of Madeira. The transatlantic crossing was a long voyage. If we think about the Atlantic slave trade, and if we think about the slave trade triangle, how are ships moving? They're moving from England or from the European continent down to the coast of Africa. Then they're coming across the southern sea, they're stopping in the Caribbean and West Indies, and then they're coming up the coast. this is a pretty long voyage. So if you stop in Madeira Islands or in port and you load casks into your hold, they're with you for the whole trip. That was not deliberate at first. And then consumers in America, in the British colonies, said, wait a minute, the longer it's in the hold, the hotter it gets, the more agitated it gets, the better the wine. So the vintners and the distributors start saying, well, if that's the case, we'll send the casks the long way around every single time. And so even when there was an opportunity for barrels of Madeira to get across the ocean faster, that route was hardly taken because they wanted the casks to age and the wine to age. So it's really important. The aging process, it became deliberate, and they started aging it on land as well, sometime in the third quarter of the 18th century, so right around the American Revolution. And that brings me to another point, actually. Do you know what the wine was that the Declaration of Independence was toasted with?
Madeira. Was it Madeira?
That's right, it really was. It really was.
Madeira.
So from the middle of the 18th century, the 1760s, when the French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War, is ending, and there are lots of treaties being signed with Native Americans all up and down the coast, Madeira was the official wine for that. On July 2nd of 1776, when they chose to declare independence and the final draft of the document was signed or was starting to be signed, the document was toasted with Madeira. And that was sort of a signal, a final signal of, this is what we're doing, we are resolved, here it is. By the way, a cask of Madeira was also, a bottle of Madeira was broken on the Hall of the Constitution in 1797 as well. So this is truly an American heritage wine. This is something that has been present for many, many, many big occasions in American history. And it's because it's a symbol of luxury to the European diaspora, but it is not specifically tied to Great Britain. So American colonists are saying, we are as European and as luxurious as you are, but we make the decisions about the Madeira that we buy on our own.
And this comes from Portugal.
And it comes from Portugal and from Madeira, so there's nothing British about it except maybe the distributors and the carriers. Madeira is an interesting case study in globalization and marketing. During the American Revolution, of course, the supply lines are cut, so the distribution of wine declines by about 3/4. 75% less wine coming into the American colonies, and that actually affects the Madeira as well, because then vintners start putting it away in their cellars. And then after the Revolution, when supply lines crank back up, now we've got aged Madeira. And what do we think today about wine? If it's older, it's better or worse? It's better, right? The older the wine, the more expensive it is. That was a trend that started with Madeira. They had aged or old wine in their cellars, and they found that they could sell it for more money. This stuff is actually some of the longest holding beverage that you'll ever find. If it stays corked, it's good for up to 150 or 200 years. Good luck getting it to last that long. Good luck staying alive that long to enjoy it. Once it's been uncorked and it's oxidized with the air, still good. 15 to 20 years. So don't worry, this stuff that's open here, you can drink it at the next Madeira night here at the Edmondston-Alston House, because it's not going to be 15 years.
So is there a particular connection between Charleston and Madeira?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to go with the Charleston Social, so that was very well timed. Oh, how nicely done. Yes. So the historic series of Madeira from the Rare Wine Company here, which is the next Madeira that we're going to taste and that we recommend, is from the Rare Wine Company. And Manny Burke, who owns that, has done a lot of historical research in rare wine and historical Madeira. He's not a sponsor of ours, we just really like his wine. And he did a lot of research that's backed up by David Hancock, a professor at the University of Michigan, and also James Tootin, who wrote a lot about Madeira right here in Charleston. And what they found was, again, when we talk about that market exchange, and not just the supply informing the consumer. So, right, here's the wine that we have for you to buy. Try it and tell us which ones you like. It was more like, here's the wines we have for you to buy. What would you have us do differently? And the consumers, especially in Charleston, answered. And so what these gentlemen who have done all this research have found is that the Americans in the northern climates prefer the sweeter wines, the Malvasia or Malmsey, and the Buell or Bowl. This one has its brandy put in at a different point. That means that it's allowed to ferment a little longer, it gets a little sweeter. Down here in the southern colonies, in Charleston and Savannah, the drier, more tart Madeiras are the most valued. And so this Charleston Surcial is made with the noble grape Surcial, and it really is an attempt to mimic 18th century Madeira. So it's a lot drier, it's amber in color, so let's give it a try. And by the way, I'm going to bring up all of, well, maybe. I didn't think to loosen the cork before we started this little shindig.
Yeah, we've had this bottle open for a little while, but as Karen said.
Uh-oh. That's okay, it's coming.
So while we were speaking about Charleston, I've heard that Madeira and Carolina Gold rice were often traded. Is that true? You know
Oh, I don't know.
The connection there, because it was obviously, you know, a preferred variety of rice, like this was a preferred variety of wine.
Well, it would make sense to me. Sorry, I'm trying to be a little more responsible on the second one. That would make sense to me, although I haven't seen anything recorded about that. That doesn't mean it's not there.
Could have happened.
Camera operator?
And when people bought Madeira, they didn't buy it in bottles.
No, they surely didn't. They were buying it in the casks. And let me take this opportunity right here to put these up to the camera. So this is a very nice, can you see it? Is that a good angle for that? This is Fine Rich Madeira. It's by Sandemann's. Sandemann is a very affordable, nice bottle that you can get in pretty much any liquor store. Do we have any questions there, camera operator? No?
Not yet.
People are just listening to me yak? Alright.
They're enjoying their own beverage.
And then this is the Rare Wine Company. Now, we find this a lot here in Charleston because it is the Charleston variety. Where you live, you might find one of the other historic wines in the series. They have a New York Malmsey and a Boston Buell, because again, the northern colonies prefer their sweeter. And then there's the Charleston Surcial, and there is the Savannah Verdejo. And so probably what you'll see most often in your liquor store would be the New York, the Malmsey. But just in case you find one of the other ones, that's a great bottle. So here we are, this one is, they didn't deal with that in the 18th century. This one is more amber in color again, it mimics more the rainwater. But this one is much, much drier. Do you taste the tartness in this one, ladies?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is your dinner drinking Madeira. I love that one. That's so nice. You know,
And what would you pair something like that with?
anything on the table here. So I would do cheese, especially rich cheeses, because this is really tart. So a lot of the Madeira companies actually recommend the more dry, tart Madeiras to go with the richer food, because it cuts through the fat, it cuts through the thickness, the richness of the food. So I love it with cheese. It would probably be amazing with duck. It would probably be great with very rich pasta dish, or
The Havarti we've got here with it was really good.
Havarti.
Yeah.
Take a little bite.
And
That's awesome.
And this one is your favorite, right?
This is my favorite.
Yeah. I've had this one before, and yet I don't remember it being this. But maybe it's because we worked up to it with the sweet stuff.
Yeah.
Yep, we went from sweet to dry this time. Now, normally when I do these tastings here at the Edmondston-Alston House, I encourage people to go from dry to sweet, just like you would taste in a normal wine room. We did it this way because I love the Charleston Surcial. It's my favorite, and I wanted to save my favorite, the best, for last of the Madeiras. And you know, so when they started aging them and they started purposefully withholding stock so that it would become more luxurious the older the wine, that started with different labels. So the carryover is today that you'll see labels that are really highly regulated with modern Madeira wine. So if it says reserve on the label, that bottle is aged at least 5 years. If it says special reserve, that bottle is aged at least 10 years. And if it says extra reserve, that's a 15-year-old bottle. And there is a tradition in Europe of purchasing a bottle of reserve Madeira or extra reserve for a baby when the baby is born.
Oh.
And then when the child comes of age and is old enough to drink, then the wine has aged properly. You can then pop that cork and celebrate that birthday. So I think that's pretty sweet. Now, another connection here to Charleston as we enjoy our Charleston social, because it wasn't just the American Revolution that Madeira was popular. After about 1807, the popularity of Madeira just continues to climb right up to the eve of the Civil War. And it was so important here in Charleston. There's actually a funny story about the Civil War. Let me know if you've heard this one. So, and this is something that people can learn more about here at the EA House. Charleston, right before the Civil War, had a jockey club.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so, probably Mr. Alston is part of the jockey clubs.
Definitely.
Oh, there's a question. Okay, before I get into this story, let's answer the question.
Did 18th and 19th century consumers worry about pairing, or did they just drink it with everything?
They probably didn't worry that much about pairing, but just like any consumable good, they would probably have had their preferences about which Madeira they were going to drink with which course. So again, all throughout dinner, but perhaps they're saving the richer ports for the dark chocolate or the dessert courses, whereas the drier Madeiras are coming through in the main food courses. So I don't know how much they worried about pairing, but that's probably pretty universal. So yeah. All right, so there's a jockey club here in the 19th century. Mr. Alston is a part of it. And just to be clear, does that mean that Mr. Alston is riding horses?
No.
No. That means that who is riding the horses on behalf of Mr. Alston? Right?
Go ahead.
The enslaved workers, right? So he's got enslaved jockeys, just like a lot of other planters and merchants and people who own these big townhouses. And part of the assets of the jockey club are an extensive cellar of Madeira. So the jockey club as an entity owns an extensive cellar of Madeira. The American Civil War starts. They hear about one William Tecumseh Sherman. And here in Charleston, the fear is that General Sherman is going to march on Charleston. So, the Charleston Jockey Club packed up all of their Madeira, and they sent it upstate, and they sent it to Columbia. Because of course they did, right? They sent it to Columbia, and they bricked it in, they put it into the basement of the local insane asylum, bricked up the door, and crossed their fingers that Sherman wouldn't come to Charleston. Well, Sherman didn't come to Charleston, but where did he go? He went to Columbia. He went to Columbia. Oh gosh. Turns out he didn't find the Madeira stashed in the basement of the insane asylum. Yay! Alright, so count one win for Charleston. So the Jockey Club, after the war, goes back to Columbia, retrieves their Madeira, and what do you suppose they do with it? You'd think they'd have a party, but they didn't. They actually sold the collection, and that was the first endowment for the Charleston Library Society.
Oh my God.
So the Charleston Library Society was endowed by the sale of Madeira from the Charleston Jockey Club
Oh, that's
at the
fascinating.
end of the Civil War.
No, I didn't know that.
I'd heard parts of it, but now it all is coming together. Like, okay, this is the full story. I've heard bits and pieces, though.
Yeah, so
I
there you
like
go.
the basement of the
The
insane
basement of
asylum.
the insane asylum. Yeah, well,
When
you
in
know.
doubt.
When in doubt. Yeah, so that's what we got going on. Now, I have no idea what time it is. Cameraman, can you tell me what time it is? Because I could talk about this all night, guys. I got way more.
It is 5:35.
5:35. Great. Wow.
last
Yeah, I'll throw this back. Now remember, this is a sipping wine. It's not a shooting wine.
when you buy Madeira, sip it. Really, it'll last you a long time. You don't have to finish the bottle. It's okay. Look at how tiny these cordials are. It's okay.
Like 1 ounce, maybe 2 ounces,
Yeah,
right?
1 to 2 ounces. 2 ounces is a standard pour in a restaurant. 1 ounce is the pour that we give you here because we want to give you lots of different varieties.
I mean, it really feels like you're drinking more of a liquor than a wine.
Sure, of course. Yeah, exactly. Apparently, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not gonna put that in real thing.
That's good enough.
Okay, so before I put my back in front of the camera. So one more quick thing, we're going to talk about port. Now, port is a much more visible fortified wine today. We see port in the market today way more than we see Madeira. That would not have been the case in the 18th and 19th centuries, but port seems to have been the dessert wine that lingered through history. And by the way, if what you're thinking is port, Madeira, sherry, these are all either dessert wines or they're cooking wines. Yeah, you're not wrong, but just like any kind of wine, if you're gonna cook with it, you should be willing to drink it. Don't cook with something you're not willing to drink. And so port actually came about as a fortified wine just shortly after Madeira. So Madeira's got the jump in terms of the timeline. Also a very popular choice in the colonial era, but not as popular Madeira. In my research, it almost seems like, okay, you don't have the Madeira I want, we'll take the port. It's not quite that. Port was certainly desired and looked after, but not quite the same as Madeira. It wasn't understood to be the luxury novelty item that Madeira was until much, much later. So this is a fine ruby Porto. It's probably going to be the most red in color of all of the. We have a friend. Of all of the. It wants our snacks. So let's see here.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, dark red.
So I would recommend your chocolate with this port. This is probably going to be our sweetest taste. Sorry.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Ah! Oh God! Wow! One for the shanty man. Alright. Poor camera guy. There you go. Alrighty. Does anybody have any questions while you watch us drink delicious things? So this one's probably sweeter, again.
Yes. Not unlike the first one that we
Yeah.
tried.
And so
Yeah.
the way that I sort of describe this one, it lingers a lot more. You almost feel like that your tongue and the inside of your mouth is coated with this, whereas the other ones sort of go down and disappear. Yeah, maybe a little heat in here. But this one stays in the mouth, so it probably is wonderful with something sweeter, either chocolate or the praline here. We have a little praline because Charleston, obviously. And this would be what we would see today as a classic dessert wine. And probably would be a choice for those big dinners for the last course. Or if you're Mr. Alston, maybe you have 2 courses of port because 2 courses of dessert.
Perhaps.
So why not? All right, so I did want to leave, whether there's any questions, I hope that was pretty understandable. Just to say, I do have a lot more to say about this, but it's a little bit in depth. It kind of becomes more of an academic lecture than sort of a fun cocktail hour. So I didn't want to burden you all too much. Just to say that by the middle of the 19th century, what we're drinking here is absolutely a luxury item, especially these unblended, these Sertials, these Verdejos. The bottles that folks like the Alstons are ordering directly from vintners and directly from distributors, these are luxury items. Meanwhile, blended Madeiras, blended ports are still being created. And I see you question, I'm going to finish my thought and I'll get to it. And so by the middle of the 19th century, to see a bottle of Madeira on the tables, the dinner tables of the farmhouse in backcountry Ohio, was just as likely as on the huge parlor dining tables of folks like the Alstons here in cosmopolitan Charleston. So the preferences start in the metropolis, but then maybe the Alstons are drinking that aged extra reserve, and we're seeing, you know, the folks in the back country who perhaps don't have the cash to spend but still have the taste, start seeing that more, that younger blended Madeira style. So, yeah. We have a question.
How long did dinners last, and how much Madeira was consumed?
That depends on who you are and how many courses. So how much, how long would an Alston dinner last, do you suppose?
A formal meal could last about like 3 to 4 hours, really, and that's why the dinner typically started much earlier, like around 3 in the afternoon. So there was still a little bit of light out when that started, but yeah,
Really adults only.
and adults only at those formal meals. We know really children under the age of 13 would be totally separate. 13, they kind of considered the age where they could have polite dinner conversations, like where they were going to be educated, who they might be marrying in the near future, and things like that. So
Oh, man.
they could then
That's a lot of pressure
sometimes
for a
be
13-year-old.
I know, they could then sometimes be invited to sit at the dinner table. But I think the amount of Madeira or alcohol that you consume depends on the person a lot.
Absolutely. Folks like the Alstons probably aren't counting the bottles. They're probably instructing their enslaved folks to get this bottle with this vintage and to start there in the cellar and to keep going. And to just open the bottle as it needs open. So if you're throwing a dinner like the Alstons are throwing, you're probably not counting. I do know that in 1 year in his 4 years as president, Thomas Jefferson purchased enough Madeira to equal about $40,000 in modern currency. There you go, 10K a year on Madeira. Yep.
Do you know what percentage of brandy was added?
I don't know, and I suspect that it's different depending on both what kind of Madeira is being produced and also whether it's going to be a reserve or not, whether they're going to age it for longer. So that would be further research that I can certainly do for you, and I'll come back to this comment section. I know that at one point in the 18th century, some vintners experimented with sending the cask of wine unfortified and sending a pipe of brandy along with it so that the consumer could decide whether they wanted to fortify the wine and how much. So I don't know when uniformity, when consistency came into the picture, but I'll find out for you. It's a great question, thank you. Well, as always, make sure that you put any further questions there in the comments. Sorry for the breezes and for the extra noises. You might be hearing the bustling of Charleston around us. No different than in the 18th and 19th centuries, just different noises. Yeah. But we hope that you have enjoyed the second floor view of the Edmondston-Alston House. We hope you've enjoyed our little survey of fortified wines here. Let me show you the port while I'm thinking of it. This is a Quinta das Carvalhas Reserva Ruby Port. And so you can go back and watch this broadcast, or maybe what I'll do is I will share with Sabrina in Digital Middleton Place some links where you can find some of these things, just information about them so that you can Google them at your own local liquor store. If you live in South Carolina or in one of the states where you can purchase beer and wine in the grocery store, you will not find port and Madeira there. It has brandy in it. It is now liquor. So make sure that you go to the liquor section of your store if you are in one of the states that sells beer and wine in the grocery store. And otherwise, yeah, let us know about more questions in the comments, and make sure that you join us next week. Next week on Plugged into History is our very own Fashion Week. So we're going to be back out at Middleton Place, National Historic Landmark, and we're going to explore specifically 18th century clothing for men and women of all classes and societal standings, including the enslaved folks out there. So we'll be talking about that a little bit more. And also, next week is National Museum Week. So we will hope to see you next week. We hope that you will help us share. Make sure that you hashtag and tag us when you're exploring all of the wonderful museums that are participating in Museum Week. It's really important, and we really appreciate you engaging with us. And speaking of National Museum Week, I just want to say that You guys not only met but exceeded our goal for matching. So we did, in case you didn't see our posts, we did meet our matching grant from the generous $25,000 matching grant. There it goes. The $25,000 matching grant that was generously offered by the Besant Freeman Foundation, Family Foundation. Thank you so much. We met that goal. We're going to be matched. It's amazing. Plus, we got a little bit on top of that. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And as always, we appreciate you joining us here. We appreciate you engaging with us, asking questions, saying hi. We're so glad you're here. And this isn't the last that we will see of Caitlin and Virginia. We'll be back out here at Edmondston-Alston House. So join us next week for Museum Week, Fashion Week. Get yourself some good Madeira because we've got another Friday History Unplugged coming up. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, ladies. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you. All right. Thanks. Bye.